We'll split the different HTML elements that we're going to cover into their own videos for you. So if you need to refer back to an individual element, you can easily do so. All the elements that we'll be looking at from now on in the HTML section of this course are elements that we write inside of the body tags of the document, as they will be viewable within the browser. There's lots of text content on web pages and apps. Let's start with the headings that you might come across in different parts, whether that be the overall heading of the website, a blog post heading, or a status update heading. They are all depicted by these heading tags. The elements themselves all start with an H and end with a number, from 1 through to 6. So for the top title of the page, we might want an H1, just like we have here. Inside the H1, we might want to put the title of the website. If we needed a heading for an article within the page, we could use another level of heading, like an H2. It's written exactly like an H1, but instead of putting a 1, we put a 2. Remember to always close your elements, ready for the next one. If that article had subheadings, we could use another level of heading again, and just work our way down. So this one is H3. It's also worth noting here that you can have more than one of these headings per page. You may have 2 articles, in which case the headings for both of these articles carry the same weight and should both use the H2 level heading. For an example of how you would structure these headings, it might look something a little bit like this, where your top level of heading is an H1, your article has an H2, that article might have 2 subheadings, in which case they'd both be H3, and then you could have yet another article which starts at H2 again. And that subsequently could actually have another H3 subheading as well. And so on and so forth. We have up to H6 for all the different levels of heading. You may notice that the browser has put different font sizes for different levels of heading. This is its default styling. This doesn't mean that we necessarily have to use the right H1 or H2 compared to font size, because we can change the font size later in our CSS. It's all about the correct order in our HTML and the fact that it reads correctly. Let's take a look in the next video at some other text elements that we might use. As well as headings, we need paragraphs of text within our page. These are described with a P element. The P element is used for blocks of text, or sentences, or in some cases just one word. Content can't stand alone in an HTML document. It has to have an element wrap it. So any text you have is usually wrapped with a P tag. There are also a number of elements to describe text. Let's have a look at some of the common ones. If text has importance, it is wrapped with a strong element. Notice how it's inside the paragraph element. There's a couple of these text elements that usually sit within paragraphs like this, because they're just describing the words that are inside the paragraph. Notice here how the browser styles the strong text to be bold. This is the default styling by the browser. But the element itself, this strong element, is not for styling. It is for describing the content as important. If you just want bold styling, there is a content element for that. It's the B tag, which stands for bold. Again, this is one which sits within the paragraph. And as you can see on the right, the text is style bold, just like the important tag. We can change this later with CSS. So just make sure you're using the right element in the right time. This pattern is the same for italic or slanted text. To emphasize a word in a paragraph, we use the EM element. But if we just want italic styled text, we have an I element for that. Sometimes we may need to target text to change the style of it in any way we choose without any suggested defaults or suggested content. There's an element for that. It's called a span. It doesn't suggest any content to the document nor cause the browser to add any styling. If I add my span element in here, again, it's an element that we put inside a paragraph. On the right, you can see that there is no change to that paragraph styling. Another element to note is the time element. This is used if you want to denote a specific period of time, like a duration or date. The time element takes an optional but specific attribute, the date time attribute. The value is also very specific. It depicts the time within the element as a machine-readable string of characters in a format so the program can read the time as well. So for our example here, we would have the month and the date separated by a hyphen. That way, the program reading the document also knows that inside the time element is the 25th of December. There's lots of different formats for time. We could also have something like 10:00. The date time attribute here is different because we're depicting a time, not a date. So we would write 10:00 in 24-hour clock time. There's a whole list of all the different formats that you can use in the resources for this course. There are more text elements than we've looked at here. Let's have a look at lists in the next video.
Please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you will be notified with my latest videos and updates.